They told us a promise had been made, a promise written not in ink, but in blood, a covenant between two shores. They said America would send her children home, that the land of liberty would plant its reflection upon African soil. They called it Liberia, the place of the free. But what is freedom when it arrives in someone else's language? What is a promise when its echo is louder than its truth? When the ships came in the 19th century, they carried more than bodies. They carried belief. Men and women who had survived. The lash and the auction block stepped onto this coast, trembling yet proud. They kissed the sand, built churches, raised flags. They believed they were returning to a motherland that had waited for them through centuries of pain. And America watched, smiling from afar, claiming the glory of a noble deed. But behind the speeches and the hymns lay another design. The same hands that sent them carried ledgers, maps, and intentions. The nation that spoke of freedom still trembled at the thought of true equality. So rather than heal its wounds, America exiled them, her unwanted proof of conscience, and called the exile redemption. Liberia became the mirror in which America hoped to see her virtue reflected. But when she looked, she found not her reflection, but her contradiction. For here, the freed became rulers over the native, and the soil meant for reunion grew seeds of separation. Two peoples, both African in blood, divided by the ghost of an empire across the sea. That was the first betrayal, the birth of imitation instead of identity. I speak tonight not to accuse but to remember, because memory, though painful, is the only bridge between what we were promised and what we became. America, you called us your experiment. You sent your dream to our coast, wrapped in prayer and proclamation. You told the world that liberty had sailed across the Atlantic, yet you forgot to tell us that even liberty can be colonized. We inherited your constitution, your flag, your faith, but not your power. You taught us democracy without teaching us justice. You gave us independence without giving us equality. And when we faltered beneath the weight of the contradictions you sent us, you turned your eyes away, whispering, "It was never truly ours to keep." But history does not forget the hands that built it. The world still remembers the black sails on white waves, the trembling hymns of those who thought they were coming home. Their footsteps are still beneath our streets, their hopes still buried beneath our marble monuments. Liberia was meant to be the light of a new age, the proof that two wounds could heal each other. Instead, it became a question mark written on the edge of two continents. Tonight I speak not from bitterness, but from awakening. For the lost promise of Liberia was never a failure of destiny. It was a failure of honesty. And honesty is returning, like a tide that has finally remembered its own rhythm. The diaspora is stirring again. Across oceans and timelines, I feel it. The heartbeat of those who still carry Africa in their names, their music, their blood. They are asking, what happened to the experiment? Why did the promise fade? And to them I say, the story did not end in ruin. It was merely interrupted. The same land that once received exiles will now receive visionaries. The children of the diaspora will not return as guests or governors, but as equals, reclaiming the promise that was never America's to keep, but Africa's to fulfill. Because the truth, my friends, is that no empire can finish a story it did not begin. They called it a republic, the first on African soil, a place where liberty would bloom and prove to the world that black men could govern themselves with wisdom and grace. But what they never said aloud was this: it was not liberty that took root first, but imitation. Our fathers copied the blueprints of their former masters, believing that if they spoke the same words, wore the same robes, built the same halls, they would inherit the same respect. But a reflection, no matter how perfect, cannot breathe, and a republic born from borrowed air soon begins to suffocate. The Constitution we inherited was flawless in form and flawed in spirit. It spoke of equality, yet built invisible walls between those who returned and those who had never left. The settlers called themselves Americo-Liberians. They brought discipline, education, and faith, but also distance. They governed as the freed once governed the enslaved, cautious, proud, afraid to lose control. And so the circle repeated. The children of oppression unknowingly became its heirs. Liberia became two nations, one on the coast, one inland, one that prayed in English, one that sang to the ancestors, two halves of a whole that never met as equals. America watched silently. To her, the experiment was working. The flag still waved, the trade still flowed, and the world still believed in the illusion of success. But every illusion casts a shadow, and ours grew darker each year. When the wars of empire came, we offered loyalty. When the world was divided between power and poverty, we offered faith. And yet, in every promise, we remained the footnote to someone else's story. They praised our resilience but never shared their resources. They celebrated our freedom but denied our equality. I have walked through our archives, through the brittle papers where our first treaties lie like dried leaves. I have seen the signatures of men who believed they were securing a future, and the countersignatures of others who saw only a contract for convenience. America called us a sister republic. But a sister does not stand on one side of the ocean while her sibling starves. A sister does not forget the face that resembles her own. And yet I do not speak in anger. For even betrayal can be a teacher, and Liberia has learned its lessons well. We learned that imitation without identity is slavery in disguise. We learned that freedom without self-knowledge is only decoration. And we learned that the truest independence is not declared. It is discovered. Every nation has its ghost, and ours is the unspoken truth that the republic we built was half American, half African, yet never fully either. We stood between two worlds trying to please both, until we forgot which heartbeat was our own. But history, though cruel, is not without mercy. The same tide that once carried our ancestors across the ocean now carries their descendants back, not in chains but in curiosity, not as property, but as seekers. The diaspora returns not to restore the old Liberia, but to reveal the one that was buried beneath imitation, the Liberia that never had the chance to breathe. We are that chance now. We, the inheritors of two histories and one wound. We are the bridge between the experiment and the awakening. For the promise was not lost. It was misplaced, hidden beneath the weight of mimicry, buried under the fear of disapproval, but still there, waiting. And tonight, beneath this same sky that once watched the ships arrive, I say to America and to the diaspora alike, the republic you began has grown beyond your reach. It is no longer your reflection. It is your reminder that no nation can gift freedom. It can only return what was stolen. For a time, America still spoke our name. In her parades, she called us the proof of liberty, the living emblem of her moral triumph. But then her voice faded, and only the echo remained. When our markets failed, she did not answer. When our soil grew red with brothers' blood, she sent condolences instead of courage. And the nation that once claimed to be our example turned its face to other continents, other prophets, as if the sea itself had erased us from her memory. The silence of empires is never empty. It hums with calculation, with the slow turning of gears that measure what is useful and discard what is not. Liberia, once her experiment, had become her reminder, a reminder of unfinished justice, of questions America preferred to keep unanswered. We waited for aid that never came, for voices that never spoke, for the dream that once crossed the Atlantic to return in truth. Instead, we were studied like a patient whose illness no one wished to cure. When the wars came, our wars, born from the fractures she left within us, we learned how alone liberty can be. We learned that friendship built on symbolism cannot stand the weight of suffering. And yet in that silence, something unexpected grew. We began to listen to ourselves, without guidance, without applause, without the promise of rescue. We turned inward and found the fragments of a soul still whole beneath the ruin. Perhaps that was the lesson the empire never intended to teach us, that neglect can be a form of liberation. For when the silence deepened, we began to hear our own voices again, in the markets, in the songs, in the prayers that mixed English with forgotten tongues. We began to speak not to please but to understand. Still, I have often wondered, if America had truly believed in the experiment, if she had stood beside us when the storms rose, would we have become stronger sooner, or would her presence have kept us forever dependent, forever imitating, forever unsure? History does not answer such questions. It only watches, and I have come to see that perhaps the silence of the empire was both her betrayal and our opportunity, because in that long quiet, we learned the hardest truth of freedom, that it survives only when it no longer needs witnesses. Tonight I do not beg for attention. I summon recognition, not the shallow kind given out of guilt or nostalgia, but the deeper kind that knows our fates are still bound by the same ocean. America, if you listen now, listen not as a savior, but as a sister who left her sibling behind. We are not your failure. We are your unfinished sentence. And to the diaspora, to those who carry both our stories and our scars, know this: the silence you inherited was never emptiness. It was waiting. Waiting for the day you would remember that home is not a place you find. It is a truth you reclaim. The empire's silence built our solitude built our strength. And now, that strength will build the chapter that neither empire nor silence can erase. Across the ocean, There are faces that look like ours but bear different names. They walk under city lights that never sleep, speak in tongues shaped by centuries of distance. And yet when they dream, Africa still finds them. In their laughter, in their rhythm, in the sorrow that visits without warning, she is there. These are the children of two worlds. Born in one, called by another. They live between histories, America's story in their mouths, Africa's blood in their hearts. They are the walking proof that the promise was never buried, only scattered. To them I speak tonight, not as a president, not even as a Liberian, but as a voice from the shore where everything began. The land you call foreign remembers you. The trees that bore witness to departure still whisper your names in the wind. The same sun that darkened your ancestors' faces still waits to see your return. Do not let anyone tell you that home is behind you. Home moves with you. It waits for the moment when memory outweighs comfort. America taught you ambition but not origin. She gave you dreams but not direction. And for generations, you were told that Africa was a myth. Too poor, too broken, too far. But look closely. Every movement of resistance that ever rose in you, every song of freedom that ever shook the earth, had the rhythm of drums you were told to forget. You were never disconnected, only redirected. They gave you new flags, new gods, new alphabets, but none of them erased the pulse that began here, in the cradle they called the Dark Continent, but feared for its light. Now the world is turning again. Borders are trembling, economies shifting, power realigning. And once more, the children of two worlds are called to choose, to remain exiles of their own story, or to become authors of a new one. I do not ask you to abandon the lands that raised you, America, Europe, the Caribbean. They are parts of your journey, but not the full truth of who you are. I ask only that you return in understanding, not in nostalgia. Return not to reclaim what was lost, but to rebuild what was delayed. We need your vision, your skill, your voice. You who have seen both privilege and prejudice, you are the bridge between worlds that forgot they were one. You carry within you the memory of every ship, every name whispered in the dark, every heartbeat that refused to stop beating. When you rise, Africa rises. When you heal, the ocean remembers its promise. And Liberia, this land of contradictions and courage, must become more than an experiment. It must become the meeting ground of two histories, the place where the descendants of exile and the children of endurance finally stand side by side. We cannot change how the story began, but together, we can decide how it ends. The diaspora must no longer look at Africa as a mirror of guilt, but as a map of possibility. Come not as tourists of tragedy, but as builders of tomorrow. Come with questions. Come with skills. Come with courage. Come and speak the languages your ancestors never had the chance to teach you. Come and let the Atlantic no longer divide us, but define us. For we are not the broken halves of a forgotten promise. We are the living continuation of it. And when the world looks again at this continent, let them not see charity or chaos, but the reunion of a people who finally remembered themselves. America, you once called us your reflection. You said that through us, the world would see your mercy, your virtue, your belief in liberty. But the mirror has cracked, and what it reflects now is not your glory, but your unfinished soul. We were your experiment, yes, but experiments end when truth begins. And the truth is that no nation can test freedom without first living it. You built your monuments on the claim that all men are created equal, yet you sent the proof of that equality away across the ocean, hoping distance would quiet the guilt. It did not. It only taught us to find freedom on our own terms. For years we waited for you to remember us. We sent letters, ambassadors, appeals. We asked for guidance, for recognition, for partnership. But your silence was louder than any denial. Now we no longer wait, because the silence you gave us became the soil of our independence. Your absence became the echo that forced us to hear ourselves. And tonight, I do not speak as the head of a failed experiment, but as the witness of its transformation. Liberia is no longer America's unfinished dream. It is Africa's unfinished destiny, reborn, reimagined, and reclaimed. Our soil has known both the footstep of the enslaved and the footprint of the free. It has tasted blood and prayer, empire and faith. And yet it lives. It still calls to its children across every ocean, reminding them that the story did not end with exile. It only began there. America, we do not resent you. We have outgrown resentment. We carry the same wound, but we have learned what you have not, that the past cannot be erased. It must be redeemed. You sent us away as evidence of conscience. We return as evidence of survival. You sent missionaries. We send memory. You sent laws. We send legacy. Because in the end, it was never about who freed whom. It was about who dared to remain human when history demanded silence. And to the diaspora, to the children of Harlem and Houston, Kingston and Accra, London and Lagos, hear me clearly. You are not the echoes of the past. You are the architects of the future. You carry two identities, but one purpose: to prove that the distance between continents can no longer separate. The blood that remembers itself. Do not return in shame. Return in strength. Return not as lost heirs of a forgotten empire, but as living proof that the spirit cannot be enslaved twice. For every ancestor who crossed the Atlantic in chains, a descendant must now cross it in purpose. That is the new migration. Not of suffering, but of restoration. Not of exile, but of enlightenment. And Liberia will open its arms again, not as a symbol of imitation, but as a beacon of rebirth, a bridge between the dream of Africa and the conscience of America. Let the scholars write their reports. Let the world analyze its geopolitics. History, in the end, listens only to the truth that bleeds. And our truth is this: the promise of Liberia was never lost. It was waiting for its rightful owners to return and claim it. So let this night be remembered not as the closing of an experiment, but as the opening of a covenant between those who left and those who stayed, between those who dreamed and those who endured, between the ocean that divided and the faith that survived. The world watches Africa again, some with doubt, some with fear. But what they call instability, I call transformation. What they call chaos, I call rebirth. For in every trembling of the old order, there is the heartbeat of something eternal, a continent remembering itself. And so, to America I say, your chapter in our story is over. To the diaspora I say, your chapter is beginning. And to Liberia I say, the time for experiments has ended. Now begins the era of truth. Because we are no one's reflection anymore. We are the light itself.